I'm here today talking to Aileen Anderson, who's a professor of anatomy and neurobiology here at UC Irvine and a leading researcher in the field of spinal cord injury. Welcome, Aileen.
Thanks for having me.
You were drawn into the stem cell field in part because of Christopher Reeve.
He was an enormously passionate guy, and passionate for the idea that one could affect change. One could affect change by fundraising. One could affect change by directing dollars into research. And passionate for the idea that he was going to be able to make progress in his lifetime and have an effect. I don't know how I would deal with that same injury, and I always think about that. Chris dealt with it by putting his energies into trying to not just move himself forward, but move a whole field forward. And that's a pretty remarkable thing to do.
Can you explain to a layperson what happens in a spinal cord injury?
So in spinal cord injury, you can think of it as being a bruise, right? So just as if you fell down the stairs and bruised your leg or bruised your arm, it's a contusion. The blood flow is disrupted. There's a primary center of injury. You can see that when you have a bruise. In the case of spinal cord, though, it's more complicated because the central nervous system isn't hooked up very well to regrow. And so repairing that damage is impaired.
What's the impact of spinal cord injury in this country? I think people don't understand that it's actually much more prevalent.
There are actually about 1.3 million individuals in the U.S. that are currently living with paralysis from spinal cord injury. 5 million people living with paralysis from multiple etiologies, from things like including Lou Gehrig's disease, for example. We've turned the corner a little bit in terms of spinal cord injury research in that we have threads to pull in a number of these different areas to follow up where things are moving quickly into clinical trial now. So we can understand ways to block the signaling from inhibitory molecules, to convince axons, to convince the wires that wouldn't normally regrow in the central nervous system to send out new sprouts and make connections.
In your lab, you work on a cell type called neural stem cells. Tell us a bit about those.
Every tissue in your body has a resident stem cell population of some kind. So for the central nervous system, for your brain and spinal cord, the resident stem cell population is called a neural stem cell. Almost 10 years ago now, it was identified that humans in their brains as adults have neural stem cells that still exist. Well, this was a big change. When I was in graduate school, as you probably were trained, the flat dogma was that there are no stem cells in the adult brain or spinal cord.
Talk a bit about the time frame of science and how long it sometimes takes to go from a basic understanding of a problem to solving it clinically.
Many people in the United States are on cholesterol blockers of some kind. It was 20 years from understanding the basic biology to getting into the clinic. 20 years, it's a long time. In the context of stem cells, my laboratory initiated was initiated with us, our first collaborative projects for stem cells with a company called Stem Cells, Inc. 10 years later, we were able to announce clinical trials with those cells for spinal cord injury. 10 years. We didn't twiddle our thumbs for 10 years. That was 10 years of hard work to get across the line.
How excited were you to actually get to go to clinical trial?
The idea of being able to bring something forward to clinical trial that has a shot of being tested in humans and a shot of maybe making people better, I mean, that's a lot. It was an enormous goal that I mean, it's a fantastic thing to have been able to be a part of.
You talk about working with Stem Cells, Inc. What expertise do they bring to bear?
None of this is a set of work that we could have done without a very close collaboration from a corporate perspective. They keep us focused from not just sticking to the basic biology, but thinking translationally, which I think has been productive for both sides. We really couldn't have done it without that full-scale interaction.
Talk about why independent funding is so important.
We never know, as scientists, where the big leap is going to come from, and they often come from rather unexpected places. Things that have enormous impact in the field come from serendipity. They come from something that you found in lab that didn't quite make sense, you pursued to get to the next level. That's really where the new discoveries come from. That's where the big jumps come from. It's very hard to get those paid at conventional funding agencies and to garner support for those projects.
You have enormous hope for the future, I think.
I look at myself as being very fortunate to be a scientist because not only do I have a shot to have some long-term effects and I hope help people eventually, but I get to enjoy what I'm doing every day when I do it.
Aileen, it's been great talking to you. Thanks ever so much.